Under the golden lights of a luxury restaurant, the kind of place where businessmen in tailored suits and elegant women in glittering dresses gathered every evening, a man walked in quietly. He did not announce his arrival. He did not bring a group of people with him. He did not even dress like someone who belonged in such a rich place. His clothes were simple, a plain black jacket, faded jeans, and worn boots that looked comfortable but not expensive, yet the man carried something that no designer suit could match. A calm and gentle presence. That man was Keanu Reeves. Most of the guests were too busy with their own meals and conversations to notice him at first. A few waiters recognized him instantly, their eyes widened, and they shared quiet whispers among themselves. They knew who he was, the world-famous actor, but they also knew about his reputation for humility. He often came without bodyguards, without making a scene, as if he were just another ordinary person who wanted a quiet meal. For Keanu, it was nothing unusual, but for others it was almost shocking. At a corner table sat a woman who noticed him the moment he entered. She was dressed in shining jewelry, diamonds on her fingers, a golden necklace around her neck, and a dress that looked like it had cost more than most people's cars. She was the wife of a billionaire, and she enjoyed the way people always turned to look at her when she walked into a room. To her, appearances meant everything. She believed respect was bought with money and shown through glamour. So when she saw Keanu walking in dressed so modestly, her lips curled into a smirk. She leaned toward her friends, wealthy women like herself, and whispered something that made them laugh. Her voice wasn't low enough, though, and a few nearby diners caught her words. "Is that really Keanu Reeves? He looks like he borrowed his clothes from a charity box," she sneered. The other women giggled, covering their mouths. Their laughter spread like a ripple across the table, and the billionaire's wife enjoyed the attention she got from mocking him. Keanu didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did but chose not to care. He walked calmly to his table, greeting the waiter with a warm smile. "Thank you," he said softly as the waiter pulled out a chair for him. His voice carried no pride, only kindness. He placed himself down, not demanding the best seat, not asking for special treatment. He was just a man ready to enjoy his dinner. But the woman at the corner table kept watching. Her eyes followed every move he made. And the more normal he acted, the more it annoyed her. To her, fame was meant to be shown off. If she were as famous as him, she thought, she would arrive in a shining limousine, wearing the most expensive dress, with photographers snapping pictures as she entered. But here was Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved stars in the world, sitting quietly, almost blending into the background. It didn't fit her idea of how a celebrity should behave. She whispered again to her group, louder this time. "He doesn't even belong here. This place is for people of class, not whatever he is pretending to be." Her friends nodded, some hesitantly, some just to stay on her side. But others in the restaurant had already started to notice the scene. They didn't laugh with her, instead they gave her sharp glances, silently disapproving of her cruelty. Meanwhile, Keanu asked the waiter about the menu with genuine interest. He complimented the chef before even tasting the food, saying he had heard wonderful things about the restaurant. His gratitude was simple but real. The waiter's face lit up. Unused to such respect from rich customers, it was clear Keanu treated everyone equally, no matter who they were. Still, the whispers and mocking looks from the corner table continued. The woman adjusted her diamond bracelet, proud of the sparkle, and leaned back in her chair as if she owned the entire place. She thought she was winning by making fun of him. What she didn't realize was that the more she laughed, the more people began to notice not Keanu's clothes, but her arrogance. Keanu, however, remained untouched. His calmness was like a shield. He had been through enough in life to know that dignity did not come from a suit or a jewel. It came from how you treated others. And though he didn't respond to the whispers, his very presence, his quiet confidence, spoke louder than any defense he could have made. The evening was only just beginning, but already the stage was set. On one side, a humble man of great fame who walked in like an ordinary soul. On the other, a woman with wealth and status, eager to humiliate him. She thought she had the power, but soon, the truth of character would reveal who really stood tall in that room. The restaurant was alive with the soft sound of music, the clinking of glasses, and the quiet murmur of wealthy guests talking about business and vacations. Yet in one corner, a different kind of sound began to grow. The whispering laughter of the billionaire's wife and her group of friends. They were not whispering in kindness, they were whispering to mock. Their voices carried just enough for nearby tables to hear. The woman leaned close to her friends, her jeweled earrings catching the light as she tilted her head. Her lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't warm, it was sharp and cruel. "Look at him," she said in a voice filled with scorn. "He's supposed to be a star, but he looks like he came in off the street." Her words made her friends giggle, one of them covering her mouth as if to hide the laugh. But none of them stopped her. The sound of their mockery spread in the air, mixing with the music in an unpleasant way. At another table, a young couple overheard. The man frowned, glancing at Keanu, then at the group of laughing women. He whispered to his partner, "That's Keanu Reeves." "Why are they talking like that? He's famous for being kind," his partner nodded, shaking her head at the rudeness of the billionaire's wife. Already the whispers were dividing the room. Some guests stayed silent, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but everyone could feel the tension. Keanu, sitting at his table, remained calm. He thanked the waiter with a soft smile as his glass of water was placed before him. His simple words carried more grace than all the glitter on the woman's wrist. He didn't seem to notice the laughter, or maybe he did but chose not to give it importance. That was Keanu's way, ignoring cruelty and focusing on kindness. Yet the woman mistook his silence as weakness. She thought she could continue her game without consequence. She leaned closer to her group again, this time raising her voice just enough so even more people could hear. "If my husband dressed like that, I wouldn't let him leave the house," she said, tugging at the sleeve of her expensive gown to show off the fabric. "Look at me, look at us, this is how real high society lives." Not in cheap jackets and boots, she laughed again, tossing her hair, enjoying the attention she thought she was getting. Her friends nodded, one of them adding, "Maybe he's saving his money after all. Stars like him don't stay famous forever." More giggles followed. The women thought they were being clever, but around the room, more and more guests were noticing their cruelty. Some looked down at their plates, too polite to intervene. Others shook their heads, silently disapproving. The atmosphere began to shift. At that moment, Keanu turned slightly, his face calm, his eyes kind. He noticed a waiter struggling to carry too many plates at once. In one smooth movement, Keanu stood up and reached out to help steady the tray. The waiter's eyes widened in surprise, a superstar helping him in such a simple task. "Careful there, my friend," Keanu said gently, his voice warm and sincere. The waiter smiled, whispering a thank you, and hurried off. For a few seconds, the entire room had witnessed something powerful. Not money, not jewelry, but genuine humility. The billionaire's wife saw it too, but instead of softening, it only annoyed her more. To her, such actions looked ordinary. She wanted glamour, she wanted show. "Did you see that?" she whispered again, her voice dripping with mockery. "Helping a waiter like he's one of them. He really doesn't know how to behave in a place like this." She laughed, expecting her friends to join in, but their smiles were thinner now. Some of them exchanged glances, starting to feel uneasy about laughing at someone who had done nothing wrong. The young couple at the nearby table spoke again, this time louder. "I think it's wonderful," the woman said, not bothering to whisper. How many stars would even notice a waiter struggling? "He's a true gentleman." Her words traveled across the room, and others nodded quietly. The shift was clear. The whispers of kindness were beginning to outweigh the whispers of cruelty. Still, the billionaire's wife pushed on. Her pride wouldn't let her stop. She picked up her glass of wine and tilted it as she spoke. "Fame without class is nothing," she declared. "He may be known, but he will never belong here." She thought her words were final, that she had humiliated him enough, yet she did not see the truth. The eyes of the other diners were no longer on Keanu's clothes. They were on her, judging her arrogance. Her jewels sparkled, but her heart looked empty. Keanu, as if untouched by her words, sat back down. His calm expression never wavered. He took a sip of water and gave the waiter another smile. To him, this was just another evening, another moment of life where he chose peace over conflict. He had faced harder things in life than the mocking whispers of a shallow woman. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. The billionaire's wife thought she was winning. She thought her whispers were shaping the room. What she didn't realize was that every word she spoke was building a wall between her and everyone else. Every laugh was making her appear smaller, not stronger, and every act of Keanu's kindness, no matter how simple, was making him shine brighter in the eyes of those around. The whispers she began to hurt him were now turning against her. and soon she would regret every cruel word she let slip into the air. The laughter at the corner table grew sharper. The billionaire's wife was no longer whispering. She had decided that the entire room should hear her voice. She looked at Keanu's plain jacket and worn boots as if they were insults to her world of glitter and gold. "Can you believe this?" she said loudly to her friends. "A man worth millions, sitting here like he just walked out of a cheap diner. It's embarrassing." Her words floated across the restaurant like poison. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Some stared down at their plates, but all of them could hear her now. Keanu, however, did not change his calm face. He simply looked at the menu with quiet interest, as though her words had no weight at all. The waiter beside him noticed the tension and hesitated, but Keanu smiled softly. "Take your time," he said, easing the young man's nerves. The kindness in his voice made the waiter relax again. The billionaire's wife leaned forward, her eyes flashing. She was hungry for more attention. "If I were him, I'd be ashamed," she said, lifting her wine glass with slow elegance. "He thinks being polite makes up for looking so cheap. A real star knows how to shine. A real man knows how to impress. But look at him. He's invisible." Her friends forced small laughs, but their eyes darted around the room nervously. They could see the other diners were no longer amused. At a nearby table, a middle-aged man in a gray suit spoke quietly to his wife. "That's Keanu Reeves. I read about him once. He gave away most of his movie earnings to the crew who worked with him. He's one of the few who actually cares about people." His wife nodded, frowning at the billionaire's wife. "And she dares to insult him for being simple," she whispered back. The mood of the restaurant began to tilt. The more the woman insulted Keanu, the more others began to admire his silence. The cruel remarks didn't stop. The woman tapped her diamond ring against the table for attention. "Stars like him only last as long as people believe in their magic," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "But one day when the spotlight fades, what will he have left? Nothing, no class, no legacy," she smirked, waiting for Keanu to react, but he didn't. He lifted his glass of water, took a sip, and nodded politely to the waiter as if nothing had happened. That small act, his refusal to fight back, only made the woman more restless. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to see him flinch. Her pride demanded that he acknowledge her superiority. But Keanu's strength lay in his stillness. His silence was louder than her insults. His calm was stronger than her anger. The guests around the room began exchanging whispers of their own. But this time they were not whispers of mockery. They were whispers of defense. "He's a good man," someone said softly. "He helped a stranger on the subway once and never even told the press," another voice added. "I remember reading he gives millions to hospitals and children's charities." One by one, the people in the restaurant started to recall stories of Keanu's quiet generosity. The billionaire's wife, however, could not hear these whispers, or maybe she chose not to. She was lost in her own arrogance, believing that her wealth, her clothes, and her position gave her the right to look down on anyone. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied with her performance, thinking she had won some invisible battle. But the truth was written on the faces around her. The more she spoke, the more she looked small. The more Keanu stayed silent, the greater he appeared. His patience, his refusal to fight cruelty with cruelty, revealed a strength far deeper than wealth. Keanu finally glanced in her direction, not with anger, not with annoyance, but with a calm and gentle look. His eyes held no judgment, only peace. That one glance was enough to make her chest tighten. For a brief moment she felt exposed, as though his silence had mirrored her arrogance back at her. She quickly turned away, lifting her glass again, trying to hide her discomfort. The waiter brought Keanu's meal, and he thanked him with genuine warmth. "It smells wonderful. Please thank the chef for me," he said. His voice carried softly across the room, and once again it was his kindness, not the woman's jewels, that drew admiration. The staff smiled, grateful for a customer who treated them as equals. It was something rare in that place at her table. The billionaire's wife grew restless. Her friends' laughter had grown quiet. Their smiles stiff, their eyes wandered away from her. She realized they were no longer enjoying her jokes. Instead, some of them looked almost embarrassed to be part of it. This realization pricked at her pride. But still she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Her need to prove herself was too strong. She spoke louder again. "Money and fame mean nothing if you don't know how to carry yourself. He should be showing respect to this place, to people like us, but instead, he behaves like he's ordinary, Imagine that. An ordinary man, she laughed. But this time fewer voices joined her. The sound of her laugh echoed against silence, and for the first time she felt a chill of doubt. Keanu continued to eat quietly. Unbothered, his calm was unshakable, and in that silence, he was winning a battle. She didn't even know she was losing. Around the room, people had begun to admire him more. Not for his fame, but for his humanity. They compared his humility with her arrogance. And the difference was so clear it could not be ignored. The woman had set out to humiliate Keanu Reeves, but with every cruel remark she was only humiliating herself. And though she did not yet realize it, the moment of her greatest regret was drawing closer, step by step, word by word, with the whole restaurant as witness. The restaurant was filled with soft music and candlelight, but the real spotlight was on two very different people. On one side sat the billionaire's wife, her lips sharp with insults, her voice heavy with pride. On the other side sat Keanu Reeves, silent, calm, and steady. His quiet nature seemed to disturb her more than any angry reply ever could. She wanted him to fight back, to give her a reason to feel superior. But he didn't. Instead, he simply chose kindness. As the waiter returned to pour wine into glasses, Keanu leaned back slightly and gave him a warm smile. "Thank you. You're doing a great job tonight," he said softly. The waiter blinked in surprise. He was used to customers snapping fingers, complaining about delays, or treating him like invisible furniture. But here was one of the most famous men in the world treating him with respect. The waiter's face brightened, and he nodded quickly. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that," he whispered. The exchange seemed small, but the effect was large. People at nearby tables noticed. They had heard the cruel words of the billionaire's wife, and now they were watching the gentle response of Keanu. In that moment, the contrast was so sharp it almost hurt. One person used her voice to belittle, the other used his to uplift. A few minutes later, an older gentleman at another table struggled to stand up. His cane slipped and his chair nearly tipped over. Before anyone else could move, Keanu was already on his feet. He crossed the room quickly and reached out to steady the man. "Easy there," Keanu said kindly. "Take your time. No rush." His voice was calm, steady, like a son speaking to a father. The older man smiled gratefully. "Thank you, young man." "Thank you," he said as he steadied himself on the cane. The whole restaurant saw it. A superstar helping a stranger without hesitation, without waiting for applause. The billionaire's wife clenched her jaw. Her diamond bracelet sparkled as her hand tightened on the tablecloth. She could see that the room's attention was shifting, but not toward her. The more she tried to drag Keanu down with her words, the higher he seemed to rise with his actions. She whispered again to her friends, "See how he's trying to play humble? It's all an act. He just wants people to talk about him." But this time, her friends didn't laugh. One of them only gave a weak smile. Another shifted uncomfortably. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. It wasn't an act. The young couple who had noticed earlier leaned closer to each other. The woman whispered, "That's real kindness. Not fake. Look at his eyes. He really cares." Her partner nodded. "And she's still trying to make him look bad. But she's only making herself look worse." They weren't the only ones thinking it. Across the room, people were whispering, not about Keanu's clothes, but about his character. The waiter brought Keanu's food, and Keanu didn't just nod. He took a moment to say, "Please thank the chef. I've heard this dish is a favorite here. I'm looking forward to it." The waiter smiled again, almost glowing for a simple man working long hours. Those words mattered. He walked back to the kitchen with pride in his step. It was a gift Keanu had given without even knowing. Meanwhile, the billionaire's wife leaned forward, desperate to regain control of the room. "What a performance," she said loudly enough for others to hear, helping old men, praising waiters, pretending to be one of them. "He should win an award for this little act," she laughed sharply. But this time her laugh echoed in silence. No one joined her. A few heads even turned in disapproval. She felt heat rising in her cheeks, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. Keanu, however, did not even look at her. He cut a piece of his meal and ate slowly. Enjoying the food, his calmness was unshaken. His peace could not be stolen, and that peace spread around him like a shield. It made her cruelty look even smaller. For years, Keanu had been known not just for his movies, but for his humanity. He gave money quietly to film crews, to hospitals, to children's charities. He rode the subway like ordinary people. He lived simply despite being wealthy. The people in the restaurant began to remember these things. The whispers grew into murmurs. That's just who he is. He's always been this way, someone said. He doesn't care about showing off. He cares about people, another replied. The billionaire's wife realized too late that the room was no longer on her side. Every act of kindness from Keanu was like a mirror reflecting her arrogance. Her jewels sparkled brighter than ever, but no one was looking at them. They were looking at Keanu, sitting quietly, helping others, showing respect. The more she tried to make him look small, the larger he became in the eyes of everyone else. And deep inside, though she would never admit it aloud, she felt something sharp and heavy pressing against her pride. It was the beginning of shame, the kind that grows slowly until it cannot be ignored. Keanu, still unaware or simply choosing not to care, finished his meal with grace. His eyes were soft, his posture relaxed. His silence carried more weight than all her cruel words combined. And though the night was far from over, the lesson was already being written across the faces of everyone present. Kindness had the power to silence cruelty, and humility had the strength to expose arrogance. The billionaire's wife didn't know it yet, but the regret she would soon feel had already begun to take root. Every word she spoke after this moment would only grow it. And Keanu, without saying a single harsh word, was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The mood inside the restaurant had shifted like a quiet storm. At first, the laughter of the billionaire's wife and her friends had filled the air, sharp and cruel. But now that laughter had faded into something uncomfortable, people at nearby tables were no longer entertained. They were watching, listening, and comparing. On one side sat a woman drowning in pride. On the other sat Keanu Reeves, calm and gentle. The whispers that spread earlier were different now. Instead of mocking Keanu's simple clothes, people began to recall the stories they had read or heard about him. A man in a dark suit leaned closer to his wife and said, "Do you remember the article about him giving away millions to the film crew? He didn't even keep the money for himself." His wife nodded. "And he once paid for a stranger's college. I saw it online." The words traveled softly, and soon, the image of Keanu's kindness filled the room. The young couple at their table added their voices too. "He helped a woman stranded on the highway once. No cameras, no press, just him being kind," the man said. "That's the real him." People nodded quietly, and though not everyone spoke, their faces showed respect. The billionaire's wife noticed these looks, and it unsettled her. She wanted the attention, but the admiration was not coming to her. It was going to the man she tried so hard to humiliate. Keanu himself remained quiet. He enjoyed his food slowly, thanking the waiter again with a smile. His calm behavior only made his presence stronger. It was not what he wore that drew people to him, but the way he carried himself. He showed dignity without pride, strength without cruelty. The billionaire's wife tried to strike again. Desperate to regain the room, she raised her voice so more could hear. "You all are fooled by his act, don't you see? He is pretending. This is how stars play games. They act humble to win hearts, but behind the scenes, it's all fake." She looked around, expecting nods of agreement, but instead she met silence. A few people even looked away, refusing to give her the validation she craved. Her husband, seated beside her, gave a small sigh. He shifted uncomfortably, embarrassed by the scene. He knew his wife's temper, he knew her pride, but tonight she was going too far. Still, he stayed silent for the moment, hoping she would realize it on her own. Keanu, completely untouched, noticed an elderly lady struggling to cut her food at another table. Without a second thought, he rose from his chair, walked over and gently asked, "Would you like me to help?" The woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you, young man. These hands aren't what they used to be." Keanu carefully helped cut her food into smaller pieces, his touch respectful, his manner sincere. The whole restaurant saw it, and a warm feeling spread among the guests. The billionaire's wife felt heat rise in her chest. She tapped her fingers on the table, her diamonds flashing under the lights. "Can you believe this?" she hissed to her friends. "Now he's serving old women at tables like some kind of waiter." It's pathetic, but this time none of her friends laughed. They only glanced at one another, uncertain. Some even lowered their eyes, ashamed to be sitting beside her. The admiration for Keanu grew stronger. The whispers were no longer soft, they were clear. "That's why people love him," someone said. "He doesn't act like he's above anyone," another added. The energy of the room had shifted completely. The billionaire's wife was no longer the star of her circle. She was the outsider, The more she tried to tear him down, the more people lifted him up in their hearts. Her husband finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Enough," he said, his eyes met hers, serious and heavy. "You've said enough." The woman froze. Shocked by his tone, he rarely spoke to her this way in public. For the first time, she felt her control slipping. Keanu quietly returned to his seat. As if nothing had happened, he didn't look at the woman. Didn't respond to her cruel words. His silence was powerful. His actions spoke louder than any defense he could have given. The restaurant now admired him not as an actor, but as a human being. The woman's pride crumbled a little more. She picked up her glass of wine, her hand trembling slightly. The taste was bitter, not from the drink, but from the shame growing in her chest. She realized the room was no longer with her. She could feel the judgment in their eyes. Every cruel word she had spoken now weighed on her shoulders. Heavy and cold, Keanu, however, smiled gently at the waiter again. "Could you thank the kitchen staff for me?" "The food is wonderful," he said. His words were simple, but they carried warmth that filled the space around him. The waiter nodded with gratitude, nearly glowing from the kindness in that moment. It was clear to everyone who truly belonged in that room. It wasn't the woman covered in jewels. It wasn't the prideful voice that tried to rise above others. It was the man in simple clothes, the one who lifted others quietly with no need for applause. The billionaire's wife sat back, her laughter gone, her jewels sparkled, but they felt heavy now, like chains. The regret that would soon consume her had already begun to stir, and while she sat trapped in her pride, Keanu Reeves showed the world that real greatness is not measured by what you wear, but by how you treat people. The billionaire's wife had spent the whole evening trying to make Keanu Reeves look small. She had laughed at his clothes, mocked his kindness, and even accused him of pretending to be humble. But now the tide had shifted. Her words no longer carried power, and the attention she craved had slipped away. The people in the restaurant were watching her, but not with admiration. They were watching with quiet judgment. Their respect belonged to Keanu, not her. Her husband sat beside her, silent for most of the night. He had allowed her pride to run its course, but now his patience was gone. He was a man used to control, used to commanding respect wherever he went, and tonight his own wife had embarrassed him in front of people who mattered. His voice cut through the air, low but firm. "That's enough," he said. His words were simple, but they carried weight. The entire table froze. The billionaire's wife turned to him, her face stiff with shock. She had not expected him to speak against her. Especially in public, her friends stared at their plates, suddenly very interested in their food. No one wanted to get caught in the fire that was about to start. But the husband didn't raise his voice. He kept it steady, and that made it even more powerful. "You have insulted a man who has done nothing to you," he continued. "A man who is more respected than most people in this room. Do you realize what you look like right now?" The woman's cheeks burned. She tried to laugh it off, lifting her wineglass with shaky hands. "Oh, darling, it's just a joke. I didn't mean anything serious," she said. But her voice lacked its earlier sharpness. Her words were thin, empty, and the room knew it. Her husband leaned closer, his eyes cold. "A joke? Mocking a man for being kind is not a joke. Belittling someone who treats others with respect is not a joke. You have embarrassed yourself, and worse. You have embarrassed me." The weight of his words crushed her pride like glass underfoot. For the first time that night, she had no reply. Around them, the guests watched quietly. Some nodded slightly, agreeing with the husband's words. Others kept still, but their expressions said it all. They admired his courage to speak, and they admired Keanu even more for sitting there, untouched by the cruelty. Keanu, meanwhile, had not moved. He sat at his table, eating quietly, not once interrupting, not once defending himself. It was not because he was weak. It was because he understood something deeper. The dignity does not need loud voices, it needs patience, and by being patient, he allowed the truth to speak for itself. The billionaire's wife swallowed hard, her pride cracking under the weight of the silence around her. She looked at Keanu, but he did not even meet her eyes. That stung more than any insult. He wasn't ignoring her out of anger. He simply did not care. She was nothing in his world, nothing compared to the people he chose to help with his kindness. Her husband straightened in his chair. "You think money and diamonds make you powerful?" he said quietly, but everyone at the table could hear. "But true power is in character, and tonight you have shown none. Look at him. He gestured toward Keanu. That is a man people admire. Not because of his fame, not because of his wealth, but because of his heart. Can you say the same about yourself? The woman froze, his words striking her deeper than she wanted to admit. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. Her friends avoided her gaze. Embarrassed to even sit beside her, for once, she wished the ground would open and swallow her whole. Keanu gently placed his fork down, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and nodded slightly toward the husband. It wasn't a thank you, it wasn't agreement. It was simply acknowledgement, a small gesture that carried grace. His calmness in the middle of tension was like a cool breeze in a burning room. The billionaire's wife looked down at her plate, the jewels on her hand suddenly feeling like chains. For years she believed they gave her power, but in that moment they only reminded her of her weakness. She realized she had tried to use pride as her weapon, but it had turned against her. Her husband's words had exposed her, and Keanu's silence had humbled her more than anger ever could. Around the room the whispers returned, but now they were stronger. Guests spoke about Keanu with admiration. He's really like that in real life, one said. No arrogance, no show, just kindness, another added. The woman heard every word, and each one pressed against her pride like a stone on her chest. Her husband ended the matter with finality. You should learn something tonight, he said firmly. Respect is not bought with money. It is earned through actions. He turned his gaze back to his meal, ending the conversation. The message was clear. The woman sat frozen, her heart beating fast. Shame poured over her like cold water. She had tried to humiliate Keanu Reeves, but instead she had humiliated herself. She wanted to defend herself, to fight back, but no words would come. For the first time, her voice had failed her. Keanu lifted his glass of water, his movements calm. He took a slow sip, set it down, and smiled politely at the waiter again. His world was untouched. His peace was unshaken, and in that silence, the billionaire's wife felt the sharpest regret she had ever known. She had tried to tear him down, but she had only revealed the emptiness inside her. And though she did not yet say it aloud, she understood deep inside. The true lesson of that night was already carved into her heart. Kindness will always rise above arrogance, and character will always outshine wealth. The billionaire's wife sat frozen in her chair. Her jewels sparkled under the soft lights, but no amount of glitter could hide the red on her face. The laughter she had thrown around so carelessly earlier was gone, replaced with silence that pressed heavily against her chest. She had tried again and again to humiliate Keanu Reeves, yet, with every cruel word, she had only dug her own grave deeper. Now, with the eyes of the whole restaurant on her, she finally felt the weight of her mistake. She lifted her glass to hide her trembling lips, but her hand shook slightly. The wine tasted sour. Or maybe it was her pride breaking apart that made it bitter. Around her, her friends no longer giggled. They no longer leaned close to share her whispers. Instead, they sat stiff and uncomfortable. Afraid to meet her eyes, they had seen the truth. They had seen her cruelty and Keanu's kindness, and the contrast was too clear. Keanu, on the other hand, was untouched. He had not spoken a single harsh word. He had not defended himself. He had not even looked at her with anger. He simply carried himself with quiet dignity. His calmness made him stronger than anyone else in the room. He was not trying to win a battle, but somehow he had already won. The husband's words still echoed in her ears. Respect is not bought with money. It is earned through actions. They burned like fire. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She had spent years surrounding herself with wealth, using jewels and dresses as armor. But in one evening, that armor had cracked. She realized how small she looked, how hollow her pride really was. She shifted in her chair, trying to recover some of her control. It was only a misunderstanding, she muttered under her breath. But the words felt weak. No one believed her. The other guests continued their meals, but their eyes returned again and again to Keanu, admiring him quietly. An older woman sitting nearby leaned to her table companion and whispered, "What a gentleman. He hasn't said a word against her, not once." "That's real strength," her companion nodded. "Yes, and look at her, all her jewels and pride." But nothing inside. The billionaire's wife heard these words, though they were not meant for her, and each one cut deeper than the last. Keanu wiped his mouth gently with a napkin and nodded to the waiter who came to clear his plate. "Please thank the chef, it was excellent," he said softly. The waiter's face lit up again, grateful for the kindness, for him. Those words meant more than a diamond bracelet ever could. The billionaire's wife lowered her eyes. She could not bring herself to look at Keanu anymore. His silence was worse than anger. His lack of interest in her made her feel invisible. She had tried so hard to make him feel small, but now she was the one shrinking. She realized that the whole room admired him, and no one admired her. Her husband, tired of her pride, did not speak again. He had already said enough. His disappointment was written in his face, and that stung her even more. She had not only embarrassed herself, but also the man she depended on for status. For once, she wished she could take back her words, but it was too late. Keanu leaned back in his chair, relaxed. His calm presence filled the space around him like a quiet shield. He had helped waiters. He had helped an old man. He had helped an elderly woman, and he had done all of it without asking for anything in return. It was clear to everyone that this was not an act. It was simply who he was. The billionaire's wife felt her shame grow heavier. It was not just that she had mocked him. It was that she had exposed herself. She had revealed to everyone the emptiness behind her jewels, the shallowness behind her pride. She wanted desperately to turn back the clock, to erase her cruel words, but regret does not erase what has already been said. The whispers in the room were no longer soft. They were clear enough for her to hear. "What a man," someone said. "Fame didn't change him," another replied. "He's real. He's kind." The words piled up around her, choking her. Every compliment for Keanu felt like a judgment against her. Her face burned hotter. She tried to smile, but it came out crooked. She lifted her glass again, but this time she did not drink. She only held it to stop her hands from trembling. Her pride, once a tall tower, now crumbled brick by brick, and Keanu, sitting quietly, never once tried to prove himself. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than anything she could say. His calm smile, his kindness to strangers, his humility, these were his armor, and they had left her defenseless for the first time in years. The billionaire's wife felt something she could not cover with diamonds. She felt shame, deep and sharp. She regretted every word, every laugh, every cruel whisper, and she knew, even if no one said it aloud, that the whole room would remember this night, not for her jewels, not for her pride, but for how small she had become beside Keanu Reeves. Keanu finished his water, placed the glass down gently, and nodded to the waiter once more. His evening had been simple. His heart unshaken, he had no need to fight her, for in the silence, she had already defeated herself. The lesson was already written in the air. Clear to everyone, kindness had silenced arrogance, and humility had shamed pride. And though Keanu never said a word to her, the billionaire's wife regretted everything with a heaviness she could never forget. The night in the restaurant was slowly coming to an end. Waiters moved quietly between tables, clearing plates and refilling glasses. The music played softly, but the real story was still unfolding. In one corner, the billionaire's wife sat quietly, her face pale, her pride crushed. Across the room, Keanu Reeves remained calm, as if nothing had happened. His silence had spoken louder than any words, and his kindness had already left a mark on everyone who had seen it. The woman's husband leaned back in his chair. Tired of the scene, he had already scolded her, and his disappointment still lingered in the air. He didn't need to say more. The silence between them was heavy, and she could feel the weight of his judgment pressing on her. For the first time in years, she had no audience cheering for her, no friends supporting her whispers. She sat alone, even though the table was full. The other guests tried to return to their meals, but their eyes kept drifting back to Keanu. They admired how he never once raised his voice. Never once acted out of pride. He had remained steady. Even while being mocked in front of strangers, some whispered softly to each other. "That's real grace," one man said. "No wonder the world loves him," another replied. The respect in their voices filled the room, and the billionaire's wife felt each word cut deeper into her shame. Keanu asked for the bill with a gentle smile. When the waiter brought it, he added a generous tip, enough to make the young man's eyes widen in shock. "Thank you for your service tonight," Keanu said kindly. "You've been wonderful." The waiter nodded quickly, almost stammering. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." It was a moment the waiter would remember for the rest of his life. A superstar treating him like family. As Keanu stood to leave, the atmosphere shifted once more. People at their tables watched him with quiet admiration. Some smiled at him, others nodded respectfully. He returned their kindness with a small nod and a gentle smile. He did not need applause, but he had already won every heart in the room. The billionaire's wife watched him rise, and her stomach turned. Regret flooded her, heavy and bitter. She wished she could undo her words, take back her laughter, erase her cruelty. But the damage was done. She had tried to humiliate him, and instead she had humiliated herself. Her jewels felt cold against her skin. Her dress felt heavy, and her pride felt empty. Her husband leaned closer and spoke quietly, but his words cut deep. "Remember this moment," he said. "You tried to bring down a man better than both of us, and all you did was bring shame upon yourself." She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she had no words left. Deep inside, she knew he was right. Keanu walked past her table as he headed toward the door. For a second, the billionaire's wife thought he might stop, that he might finally say something to her. She almost prepared herself for his words, but he didn't. He simply walked by, calm and quiet. His silence was stronger than any speech. He did not need to punish her, for her own regret was already punishment enough. The door opened and Keanu stepped out into the night. He left the restaurant the same way he had entered, quietly and humbly, yet everything had changed inside. He had reminded everyone present what true greatness looked like. It wasn't diamonds, it wasn't money. It wasn't pride, it was kindness, respect, and humility. The guests slowly began to talk again, but their conversations were different now. They spoke about Keanu, about his gentleness, about his actions. One man said, "He could have destroyed her with a single word." "But he didn't," a woman added. "That's why he's loved, not just as an actor, but as a person." Their voices carried across the room, while the billionaire's wife sat in silence, trapped in her regret. She looked down at her hands, the diamonds sparkling, but now they looked meaningless. She realized something she had never thought before. Money could buy dresses, jewelry, and fancy dinners, but it could not buy respect, it could not buy admiration, and it could not buy the heart of the people in that room. All her wealth had failed her tonight. Her husband finished his drink, his face still serious. "Learn from this," he said quietly, "because if you don't, you will always be the richest person in the room, but the poorest in character." His words pierced her pride again, and she lowered her eyes. She had no defense. She only had shame. Meanwhile, Keanu walked down the street outside, blending into the night like any ordinary man. His simple jacket and worn boots did not shine like diamonds, but they carried something far greater: dignity. He did not need the world to see his worth. He knew it was not measured in clothes or money, but in how you treated others inside the restaurant. The guests would remember that night for a long time. They would remember the man who came in quietly, who was mocked for his simplicity, and who left as the strongest person in the room. They would remember the way his kindness exposed arrogance, the way his silence defeated cruelty, and they would remember how a billionaire's wife who thought she was powerful learned regret the hard way. The lesson was clear. True worth is not shown in jewels or wealth. It is shown in humility and respect. And as the night ended, everyone knew that Keanu Reeves had not just eaten a meal in that restaurant. He had left behind a story, one that would live in the minds of everyone there. The billionaire's wife would never forget it. For that night she learned that arrogance can be broken by something as simple and as powerful as kindness.